as you said, the pandemic has really hastened this mass transition to an online way of doing things, whether it's shopping or learning or even just the way we socialize. Now we're moving increasingly to the digital space, even though a lot of users aren't really fully aware of the full spectrum of rights entitled to them. So again, everyone is encouraged to use the Q&A box or comment on Facebook for your questions. And I guess just to kick off the discussion, I wanted to ask something about disinformation. That's FNF's theme for the year, and you touched on this at the end of your discussion. I guess just from a legal perspective and from your work in the cyber governance space, when we talk about digital rights and policy, how do you propose that we balance fighting disinformation with freedom of speech? Because as we've seen in other countries with proposed fake news laws, there's a tendency to sort of weaponize those to suppress dissent, to sort of have this chilling effect. So I guess for you, how do we balance that, and what safeguards could be written into so-called fake news laws?
Mm. So again, I'll just look. I'll look at it from the viewpoint of a lawyer. Okay. So the highest law in the land is the Philippine Constitution. The Philippine Constitution, it's actually the highest because it's the laws that protect individual human rights, which I think the highest law is innate human rights. So that's the Constitution protects, make sure that your innate human rights are followed. So with that, the innate human right is freedom of expression. And that's the highest right. It's the innate human right. And that comes to Constitution, it says that freedom of expression shall not be abridged. And that's it. It shall not be abridged. Then of course, there is a limit to your freedom of expression because the moment you hurt someone, that is called illegal speech. But then again, illegal speech is made illegal because of laws that are passed by Congress. So, for example, libel is one of those crimes that can damage your reputation. Then you're going to be called out and say, okay, you violated this right. The thing is, even with the way the Constitution was framed, it's really freedom of speech. So, if there's a violation of a right, you put that person who allegedly violated the right into trial, and then of course you're going to prove that there's no intent or there's no malicious intent. So that's where it goes. So that's the actually I took the time also to say that because that's how laws are. And freedom of expression is very, very, very important. But for the laws that govern it has to be strict that it doesn't the let's say the newly passed anti-terror bill. You also cannot impugn on other rights as a person, which is my freedom to counsel, my freedom to actually have a lawyer present with me. So those are the rights that are guaranteed to you as a person. So when implementing that, you also have to look at you're only being punished if you hurt somebody else because that's really the basis of civilized society. So I only put also what's there, that the law is there, so at least we know why. But I'm also thinking that from a legal perspective, that's the way it's constitution and then these specific provisions of the law.
So we also have a question here from Elroy Rendor. He was asking, there was a surge of fake Facebook accounts last month, and not all of the reported accounts were taken down by Facebook. The other option seems too tedious for the ordinary one. Is there any other legal recourse? If not, shouldn't there be an automatic action from the part of government agencies? And can the government compel Facebook Philippines to act on the matter?
Yes, the government, if there's actually what I've been suggesting also, that there should be an investigation on Facebook as a platform for actually allowing the creation of fake accounts. Okay, also what I noticed, just an objective point of view, a lot of accounts were created in a short amount of time. So we saw it in 1 week, there was like 10,000 new accounts. And it's so hard to create an account in Facebook. You have to verify or you have to get your name. So maybe an investigation on Facebook is proper by the government. Part of it also is it's good also that there's a citizen complaint on the initiation of this. Part of it also is like what in the United States, there was actually an inquiry on Facebook, especially connected to Cambridge. It's actually, I say this now, it's very, very important on their use of Cambridge Analytica, on how they actually propagated certain types of information to be favorable to certain candidates. So maybe this is something also that should be taken a look at by government. And I agree, it's so tedious to actually go through this process. And there should be a faster source because if the fake account or those accounts went up as easily, it should be taken down as easily also. I'm also saying that we should take action also for an investigation of the platform.
I guess sort of just to piggyback off of that, no, is there a precedent or has there been any parang in the history of Facebook and the government here? Has there been in the past any sort of government oversight of these social media companies working in the Philippines? Because a lot of the cybercrime issues that you mentioned, a lot of the threats are proliferating on social media and in part because of sort of lax policies on the part of these companies. So sort of what is the relationship been between the government and social media companies here?
I'd actually I'd give a hats off also to IPOFIL. IPOFIL has been very, very active in making sure that there's no infringed goods or fake goods being sold over marketplace. So there are a lot of been investigations. They actually call or punish out even the e-commerce platforms. Been very good. So that's a good initiative. And for so that's good. At least it's being open now for marketplace. And the DTI also has a very active desk on online sellers. So in the sphere of e-commerce. Unfortunately for Facebook or for Twitter, there's not a lot of movement in the Philippines. Maybe you should ask why also. That's a good topic why. But I've seen that there's a lot of concern in what happened, for example, in the United States, where they had an inquiry on what happened in the last elections, particularly concerning Facebook and Cambridge Analytica. So there should be one also in the Philippines, and there's something that maybe uh, could be a call to action or advocacy also.
We have a question from Facebook from Led Rob. For cyber libel offenses, which jurisdiction should be followed? The one stated in the RPC or the one in the Cybercrime Act?
Cybercrime Act. It's a different law. So libel is a different law from cyber libel. Before the passage of the cybercrime law, it was just it was just libel, ordinary libel, then committed through electronic means. But it's cyber libel. So that's everything that you need to is in the Cybercrime Prevention Act.
And you were talking earlier now about cyber libel, so relatively new in Philippine jurisprudence. And we've seen over the pandemic how sort of online speech has been weaponized in a way by, for example, the NBI has been calling certain social media users for posts, for example, just criticizing Duterte, etc., etc. I guess what protections are available to internet users to make sure that in light of these applications of the cyber libel and other online speech laws?
Actually, since there's not a lot of cases on cybercrime, you can go back and use the defense uses in libel. So a good thing also for most of the libel cases, I used to actually represent journalists before for libel cases. Is the truth as a defense has always been a very good defense. So mostly if it's public record and it's something, especially for public figures, because public figures are a different class on their own. There's actually a right of people to actually criticize not the person, but more of what are they doing. So this is a good guide. We have the right to actually criticize or to give criticism as a form of feedback. So public service being done, and if we frame the question in that, okay, I was just giving feedback for how the government can serve us better, more like a which is true, customer service, customer relations. I think maybe you can be nicer to me, or maybe I think you should improve your systems. Then it's a valid feedback. Uh, it becomes it becomes a gray area if there's attack on a public figure or a private person on a personal capacity, like you say something like advice or what that person looks like, or you give some kind of comment. Now that's a bit, it's trickier. So for us also, there's a responsibility when we do comment or criticize, you put it in the facts or what that person is doing. Then also as a guide, as Michelle Obama said, when they go low, we go high. So that's a good statement. So you attack the acts, not necessarily the person. So I think that's when it comes to mind when saying something about the public figures.
And then you touched on this, but there's an attendee who's asking specifically in the context of the anti-terror law. If it does not get deemed unconstitutional by the Supreme Court, what steps do you think that Filipinos should undertake to ensure free speech online and also to prevent being maligned by greater powers?
Sorry, I just got a bit. Can you repeat the question?
Sure.
Sorry.
So we have, yeah, it's okay. Within the context of the anti-terror law, if it doesn't get deemed unconstitutional by the Supreme Court, what steps do you think that Filipinos should undertake to ensure that free speech online is not hindered and to prevent being maligned by the greater powers?
Mhm. Okay, so you going back to the definition of the anti-terror bill. So uh, it's mostly the definition of terrorism. If you go back to it, is you actually threaten, or you threaten, or you want to instill fear or violence to a group or to the public. So part of there's usually it's again going back, if you it's a valid criticism of government, uh, then it won't be a problem. So, but if you go and attack like certain comments about what the person looks like, or there's a bit more extra, like there's a certain I think this should happen, or there's a certain threat or something like that, then that where terrorism comes in. Because at the end of the day, you would want to sow fear to the public. So when it does go, when it does become effective tomorrow, just bear in mind that it's usually, if you don't want, it's a proper discourse, or it's just a proper criticism of government, then it should be fine. But again, the problem is the quote is sometimes the interpretation becomes, let's put it this way, it's the interpret who will interpret is another question altogether. But of course, if you put like good language that this is a proper criticism government, it's just a question in the act, then it's a good defense also for any accusations of the of anti-terror of terrorism.
We have another question here from Elroy Rendor. He says, how long is the data stored? And can we also request for the data they store about us at la GDPR? I think this was typed during the e-commerce portion of the discussion.
Mm. If I recall correctly, just a few hours. It's more of like automatically the servers just expunge this. You just have to look. I think under the law, it's within 24 hours or 12 hours. It's expunged for the servers. But I think nowadays it's 6 or 12 hours, because we don't really have that. I'm not sure if ISPs have the capacity to store that much data. So after 24 hours, you consider the information gone. But if you want something, or you have to retrieve something, you have to write a letter to get that information also. But under now, ISPs or service providers actually cannot give that information without without a order from the court.
We have a very interesting question from Fernando Mendoza here. He says, during this period of the pandemic, corruption would also presumably shift from face-to-face transactions to online transactions. In this regard, any updates or new laws or jurisprudence on money laundering, the use of cryptocurrencies, etc.?
Okay, for money laundering, or for the transactions, actually the anti-terror bill started out as a money laundering bill. So it's actually to upgrade our credit rating just to make sure that terrorist financing or any kinds of activity will not proliferate in the Philippines. So that was supposed to be it. Okay. When in terms of cryptocurrency, the Banco Central and the Securities and Exchange Commission actually have a law where they actually when they have certain accredited providers of, for example, virtual currency exchange. So for all of those cryptocurrencies, and if you transact online, for example, digitally payment remittance, there's also a set of rules followed by those exchanges. So first off, there's only I think about less than 15 or 20, 15 providers of cryptocurrency exchanges. So it's good also that you transact with those who have licenses. It's a short list, so you can actually check. The more famous one, I think CoinSpeech or Paymaya, they're accredited. So you going back, you also have to check also if they're accredited. And when it comes to other exchanges that you hear of, it's good they actually report it to SEC and BSP. In fact, the SEC publishes daily in their webpage. It's a good source also of all those cryptocurrency exchange, coin offerings, or people offering to sell you Bitcoin that are, they've investigated and we see it's a scam. So the good thing about it is you only buy from those who have virtual currency exchange licenses, and they are listed in the Banco Central website.
I think another question, no, in relation to the pandemic, we've seen how certain governments, including the Philippines, have been using apps that help to track the movement of citizens or the movement of persons under investigation or confirmed cases. Just in terms of data privacy, what are the protections and regulations in place to sort of protect this very personal, because this is health information, so very personal information. How can we protect and safeguard that while also still making sure that we can fight the pandemic?
So Data Privacy Act we have a right to digital privacy. So what is mandated under the law? There's the Communicable Diseases Act. Is that if there's anything, you have to report it to the government. So the duty to report is not to private citizens, it's actually to the government. So when you log in your informations for those contact tracing, you have the duty to report, especially if you have the communicable disease, to the government. But that being said, there's a certain exception to digital privacy rights when it comes to situations of like this, the pandemic. However, it's a gray area under the law, but that's only it. The obligation to report is if you're sick, you have to report it to the government. That's the bottom line. However, for data privacy apps, there are a lot of good applications which actually scramble your information into a QR code. So, for example, you go into a place and then you just register the information. Then, for example, in the mall, that mall has the responsibility to actually guard over the data that you gave them. For example, what time you were here, and they only have the duty to report it to the government. And then the government has the same duty to make sure it doesn't go, it's not published. So that's the reason why, if you notice, if they publish a list of people who contracted the disease, it's only referred to like a name. It's only limited to what is necessary, meaning male, female, this age, and this person was at this location at the time, just to facilitate contact tracing. There's only limit as to what's possible. So you can't publish the real name, but where that person was. I think the good apps would be those that uh, converted your encrypted your information into a QR code, and then that code is only known to the government for contact tracing purposes. But of course, if you do that, everyone now is a information controller, so they're under the obligation to make sure that that data is protected.
One of the emerging trends that we have in the privacy and digital rights space is artificial intelligence and facial recognition, machine learning. How do you see the legal frameworks or the regulatory frameworks responding to these kinds of emerging trends? And do you think that enough has been done so far to catch up, since this is such a fast developing technology?
Mm. For it's interesting. Artificial intelligence. So you approach it in the two ways also, like artificial intelligence to process data. So what you call processing of big data. It's good also because it gives us a lot of data analysis in just a short period of time. So when it comes to that, that's where the data privacy framework comes into play, and also for the information, make sure that it's private. But when it comes to, let's say, people's rights or digital rights, it's very important for any big data or any artificial intelligence processing is that people's basic rights. You go back when any information or any technology is being developed, that people's basic rights are respected. So that's privacy. And that's also, you have to make sure, actually, the heart of it is consent. You have freedom of expression. And then you have the freedom to know also the information that's being taken from you or what information it's being processed. On the good side also, if you have things like artificial intelligence, uh, I think also when you also have to come into terms of how is it looking for the Philippine labor market? What is the effect of labor displacement? It makes certain jobs disappear, but it also makes things easier for us. So I think also that the growth of the BPO industry is decelerating because it's being threatened by automation. But for us also, have we also taken advantage of these kinds of technologies? Because it's both good and bad. So there's privacy on one hand, and on the other hand, if we can automate most of the jobs, then we can provide other kinds of jobs to people. So that's something that also, not just in the framework of cyber governance, but also in the framework of what are we doing to make sure that people have jobs, or is this AI or artificial intelligence helping the economy, or is it helping us do our jobs better or our lives better also?
I think I would be interested in knowing, no, like in your experience, what cyber crimes, because you mentioned, give a very comprehensive overview of all of them. Pero which ones have you seen sort of are on the rise as of recent? And how easy is it to prosecute these cyber crimes?
Uh, I have to be frank. It's hard. It's quite hard to prosecute cyber crimes, especially if you're in the receiving end. Like a lot. I've seen the rise like online theft. Online. I think they think the most is online fraud in terms of sales. But at least there's a good the government has a good complaint mechanism when it comes to consumer rights protection. But there's a lot going on in the pandemic, like they actually get your what they call social through social engineering, not hacking. They get your information from you. They call you and say, "Okay, hi, this is your long lost relative. I need your SIM card, or I need your," to some effect. So there's a lot of there's a lot of scams ongoing, and also for skimming for credit cards, it's happening a lot. I think in fact there was a raid that was conducted in connected to the hacking of a university. They found uh, skimming the implements also. So it's like in banking, it's hard. And there has been a bit slowly a bit of cyber crimes also on libel on the libel. It's been it's there has been a lot of complaint, but mostly uh, for private individuals, I've seen that they actually kind of resolve it, like take down or just a public apology. It's better. But hopefully, hopefully we don't get a rise when it comes to like public figures. Hopefully it doesn't get higher than this. So this not something that I'd want to rise also, just but be careful also of the commerce part. So in the forefront, that's it. But also for anyone listening, there has been a lot of I've seen cases being prosecuted connected to false or allegedly false information spread in connection with COVID-19 online. So there's been a drive on that also. So be careful of that.
It's been since yung Data Privacy Act natin was passed in 2012, so it's been 8 years now that we've had the law. And it was passed before 2016, so before Cambridge Analytica and all of these other before Facebook and the debate on micro-targeting, etc., etc. With what's happened since we passed the Data Privacy Act, sort of in hindsight, what ways do you think it can be strengthened further? And what ways do you think that it wasn't, or what things do you think it wasn't able to address that we see now that it should be addressing?
Okay, so there's a good law upcoming being tackled in Senate and Congress right now. It's the Open Access to Data Transmission Act. So firstly, it actually talks about increase or at least improving the access to internet. So it talks about bandwidth or the number of service providers, but it also talks about the provision on net neutrality, which I think is very, very important. So on net neutrality, that the ISP providers will not favor a certain platform over others, especially when it's free. So at least it will encourage people to look at other sources of information aside from the dominant platform. So that's one. For the Data Privacy Act, just a caveat also, it was passed in 2012, but the implementing rules, I think only in 2015 or 16. So we actually just, the deadline of compliance is just 2017. So not a lot of uh, governments have, or not a lot of corporations have complied with it because they're still in the transition stage. And finally, when it comes to like idea on Cambridge Analytica, uh, this is a bit just a thought also. The bigger data providers or yesterday's monopolies or let's say oligarchs, those are manufacturing industries. Now we have a different set of monopolies. Those are the ones that control your data or you have a monopoly over logistics. So in other countries, they have begun measures to tax these providers. I think Amazon or Facebook needs to be taxed. So that is also it's getting there. So there, I think their digital, there's a move in Senate and Congress to tax them. So if you tax this proprietary activity, it will also help curb any kind of marketplace dealings inside this platform. So I think it's a good idea also to put a bit of regulation on these new kinds of dominant players, especially when it comes to information or data over people.
So I think just to remind the participants, you can input in the chat box or on Facebook your questions, and I'll just ask one last question from me. We saw there was one of the biggest breaches, or I think the biggest breaches we've had was with the Commission on Elections when the data was leaked onto this searchable website. I think it was it was a really, I think millions of data of voters were leaked. What have you seen since then in the regulatory or legal space to sort of beefing up our electoral systems and our government agencies to protect against that? Because we've been talking mostly about how individual users can protect themselves. Pero what about our government agencies and how they've protected themselves since that major breach?
Okay. In my presentation, I have a slide there which talks about open system. So closed networks. There's open net and open networks. I think with the COMELEC or the voter database, usually when you access a system or uh, when you access a website, because for the information, the way the website was initially structured was everyone's or the voters or the information of everyone was actually in the website. So that information is readily available. It's just that there's a very thin guard against it, which is you log on and then the system will generate the information to you. So the system in a way is unsafe because when you happen in that kind of attack, you you since you put the information online, everything, you made it an open system, then it's accessible to anyone. So the level of encryption is very low. In fact, I think when the hacker was caught, it's not even a high level hack. You just needed to go through a security protocol and everyone's information is there and it's not. So for future reference also, when we design government websites or if we have information that's stored online, a good deal of it can be it you avoid open enterprise kinds of things. So if you need information that's important, not just it should be in the closed enterprise. So maybe what you can do is the website you need information, they give it to you and it's doubly encrypted. Or it's only a closed enterprise and that's it. So at least you lessen attacks that put that information. So again, there are three levels: so closed enterprise, extended. But what happened with the voter database is really an extended extended enterprise. So that's one thing that we could have. We could build more secure systems in the future. But on a personal note, also for people, make sure you have password managers. So this is equivalent for everyone. Like all of if you log in an email, you there's the point of how you like those complicated passwords. There's a point to it, so it's harder to actually decrypt and steal your information.
Okay. I think we have one last question here from Facebook here. As a matter of policy, no, should cyber libel be decriminalized? Libel under the RPC was passed during a time when an ordinary person could not publish anything at the spur of the moment, with the publisher doing editorial reviews. Right now, anyone, regardless of emotion, with heated emotions, could just post a rant that is libelous.
Okay, I'll put it as it's a good question. So I'll answer to this. More liberal countries, with those with rights, have actually decriminalized libel per se. So while I agree that in freer society you should be able to say what you want, there should be some sort of regulation also that if you plan to hurt someone or threaten someone, then maybe that should be taken off and there should be punishment for you. But in terms of libel, other jurisdictions have actually decriminalized it because it's hard to actually put a number to the damage to your person. So maybe something civil would work with other jurisdictions. But if the crime is like there's theft or there's there's theft involved, then maybe then it should fall into the other cyber crimes. But again, it's the level of how free or some more liberal societies have done it. So that's I'll answer with that how other countries with it. And maybe for anyone watching also, you could also check on the statistics of countries who have decriminalized libel. What are the effects also? Have there been more crimes committed against persons if they decriminalized libel? So it's something also that's an interesting study.